And good evening, everyone. It's the Purification finale for 2023. Everybody did a great job in our class, so we'll see how y'all are doing here. So I call this the finale because we really can talk about a couple different things tonight, and we refuse to become nuggets. So here's where we're going. So you know that we have done a lot of work for our body, but you have to understand the post-purification program is going to be even more important. And your body's ability to heal is greater than anyone has ever permitted you to believe. So know that you've done a really great job with your body, and it will thank you for it. And already you should be feeling better. You should, be sleeping better. You should be pooping better. You should be more laser focused. And I love all the ways that I feel. For me, I get so many projects done. I lose a little bit of weight, so we feel better. So hopefully that we saw really good success with our in body before and afters. We lost a lot of body fat and a lot of weight, which was great. So I made this dish last night. It's a vegan fettuccine. So we used those three ingredients. Super easy to make. You can get all these at your local grocery store. We use Publix here, and the Miracle noodles are a low carb noodle, and the Del Grosso, it's not organic, but the ingredients are pretty clean. So we use that, and then the corn, they're diced chicken with a Q, and it's a mycoprotein. There's no soy in it, and it's vegan. Has 17 grams of protein in it. It's got a few extra grams of carbs in it, but you just saute that with a little bit of olive oil and garlic, and then I just mixed everything together, and that's what we had for our dinner last night at our in class. Plus, everybody brought some really great keto desserts. So everybody got stepped out of their box and tried some different things. We had really good things. So I'll put those recipes together and put them on the website for everybody. So the first thing I want to kind of go over real quick, because some of you did this that are on the call. And I would say that if you haven't done it, I highly recommend to do it. But we did the omega-3 quant index, omega-3 index test. And we use that because we look at two different things when we look at our blood and our cell life. So our cell health is important and our brain health is important. And if you're not doing your best at taking care of yourself, then you can see that curve that we talked about last week, that physiological headroom. The expected normal quality of life declines with aging. It doesn't have to be that way. We should have optimal, a lifespan, and we can do that by making sure we're getting optimal fatty acids. And those omega-3 fatty acids are the very fatty acids to really feed the brain. So if you don't know, you need to kind of look at that, and we get tested for that. So when we look at omega-3s, there's a difference between the 3s and the 6s. And the omega-3, the eicosanoids, which are the EPAs of the omega-3, those are the anti-inflammatory. So on the left, you can see all the benefits of eating foods that are rich in omega-3s, which are mostly your fishes, especially your deep cold water fish. And then on the omega-6 side, you can see all the complete opposite. And omega-6s are coming from our processed foods, our grains, anything in a bag or a box that's not a vegetable. So, we have a complete opposite. So when we look at the difference on here, we see that the omega-6 are strongly associated with inflammation. And these are just some foods you can look at the amount of inflammation that is on there. So like corn chips, you can see the difference of what the amount of omega-6s are in corn chips. So we know that that food like that is going to be more inflammatory. Fast foods, the Subway, the tuna, just the Subway sub itself, a sandwich for 6 inches, that's another 14,000, in omega-6s. That's a lot of inflammatory process that goes on in our body. And this is the, unfortunately, the standard American diet, that what we call the SAD diet. And you can see I've got other things down here, Burger King chicken sandwich. I mean, they're so high in omega-6s. And we wonder why our joints hurt, and we wonder why we don't feel good. When we eat this way, it's just purely causing inflammation in the body. And not only in our joints, but it can cause inflammation in our heart and also in our brain. So we test and we want to make sure we're getting enough omega-3s. And that's why we use this particular test called the Omega Quant. And it's a blood spot test. Takes about a week to do. If you haven't done it, call the office. We'll get you hooked up. But it will kind of measure, we want to make sure that we get enough omega-3 so we have a good healthy blood flow, that we have healthy triglyceride levels, we have a normal heart rhythm, and we also have healthy blood pressure levels. But that's just talking about the heart itself. That doesn't even include the brain. So the brain is the other factor there. The omega-3s are crucial in taking out the neural trash. When we think, the neural fibrils tangle and create an exhaust, just like in a car. And that exhaust or that garbage is actually taken out by the omega-3s. So that's crucial. That when those neural fibrils tangle, that's what causes things like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, those neuroinflammatory diseases. So we want to really have these foods that we can eat. And this is so important. This is something you can do every day. If you're not eating fish every day, you want to do some supplementation. When we look at physician studies, here's a really interesting one. And most of in the class, when we checked everybody's levels, they were in the mid to high fives. I had one at 6. So once you get up into that level of 6 and higher, it gives you a 90% reduction of possibility of sudden death due to heart. That's risk of stroke or heart attack. That's a huge factor. And that's just from taking either some type of fish oil. If you're over 50, I recommend cod liver oil. If you're under 50, you can do just regular, we use tuna omega in our office, but there's a whole list of fish that you can eat. And the like salmons and the herrings and mackerel, those oily fish are going to give you higher levels of omega-3s. So the other thing we need to talk about tonight is what we're going to do past the purification. So during the purification, most of my patients that are in my functional medicine, under my functional medicine umbrella, are doing a lot of low carb, high fat. So let's just explore that, because I really want you to kind of switch your eating over to that, because in the long run, that's going to be a lifestyle of how you're going to eat. And it's a really easy lifestyle to maintain. So you don't have to know this. I'm not testing on this, but this what a ketone is in the body. So really, the only thing you need to understand is that the liver makes those ketones, and if we don't have enough sugar in our body, the liver makes those ketones. So how does this all work? So if we look at a traditional diet, which is higher in the carbohydrates, say you eat some bread, your glucose levels rise, your pancreas then has to secrete insulin, and that insulin takes that glucose and puts it into the cell to create energy. On a keto diet or a low carb, high fat diet, we're eating less carbohydrates, we're eating higher fat. So as your glucose starts to fall, then your lipase releases those stored triglycerides, and that fatty acid travels to the liver, and then the liver produces ketones, which then creates your energy. So it's a better, more efficient form, less traumatic on your body. And when we talk about ketogenic or low carb, high fat, I don't really recommend all my patients going into ketosis. I do have some that do that, but really just doing a low carb, high fat, consistent diet will give you the benefit of reducing these risks. And anything that works with those low carb, high fat diets will have you lower your risk of diabetes, heart disease, epilepsy. That's actually what a ketosis diet was developed for, was for kids that were epileptic. Also, any kind of neuroinflammation, cancer, respiratory, acne, PCOS, weight loss. I mean, so there's so many benefits of just shifting your your lifestyle of eating to a more low carb, high fat. Trust me, you'll be satiated, you won't get hungry. And then my patients are like, well, or you hear people say, well, if you eat a lot of fat, it's going to cause heart disease. And we talked about this, earlier on in the classes, like the first or second class, how in the 60s, Ansel Keys came in and said, hey, Eisenhower had a heart attack because he ate a lot of red meat. So stop it, get all that saturated fat out of your diet. And so everybody pulled their fat out of their diet. Then things tasted like crap. So they put a bunch of sugar in it to make it taste better. So now we may have a little lower in the heart disease, but now we have diabetes and obesity. So, and neuroinflammation, all related to the sugar. So here's from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. This was back in 2010. So we've known this for a while. And it says a meta-analysis. So what they did is there was a bunch of different studies done with evaluating eating saturated fat and the effect of that on the heart. And after analyzing all those studies, they decided that there's no evidence significant enough concluding saying that saturated fat is associated with increase in cardiovascular disease or chronic heart disease. So that's one. And here's the other study, another one right here, and this was from 2006. So we've known this for a while, but these studies kind of get buried. Now, when I teach you, this is where I get my information. This is PubMed, and this is all done through all public access, so we can dive in deep into these journals and peer-reviewed reports. And here, this one says that a ketogenic diet really is neuroprotective. So it protects your brain and can modify diseases. So it can modify activity in a broad range of neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and it may be traumatic, help with traumatic brain injuries as well, and people that have had stroke. So we have documented evidence, and this is just one of many. I mean, we only have a short period of time, so I can't show you everything. So if you think of excess stubborn fat, really the problem is it's stuck energy in the fat cell. So when we eat enough fat, that gives the body permission to utilize fat for fuel. So we have two fuel sources. Most people are using only burning sugar, and that's glucose, which is it's fine, but we understand early on if we're just burning sugar and we run out of sugar, you can't switch over to burning fat. Then the next thing that happens, we start burning muscle and we muscle waste. And we can't afford that as we age because we have a naturally habit of sarcopenia happening. We talked about that last week. That's why we do exercise to prevent that. And the other fuel source is fat. So our blood sugar, when we're awake, different from a fasting blood sugar that I'm looking at when I look at your blood work, it wants to be at 100. It'll do whatever it takes to keep it there. So it works hard to keep it from going up. It works hard for letting it go too low. And at 100, you have your best, you're mentally and physically. So if we were to measure my blood sugar right now, it'd probably be right at 100. So 100 means that you have exactly 2 teaspoons of sugar in your blood, not a whole, cupcake, cake, or pie. So insulin is really important because it's a hormone that lowers your blood sugar by removing sugar from the body. So when you eat sugar, the insulin goes in, grabs the sugar, takes it, and puts it into the cell for energy. But if you keep putting stuff in, it doesn't have time to do that, and then you get something that you hear people say as being insulin resistant. And then the insulin can't do its job. It's like, hey, you've given me too much. I don't know what to do. And then we start storing it as fat. Because carbohydrates, which is what sugar is, they're big and bulky. They're big carbons and hydrogens and oxygens. And when we eat them, if we're not going to utilize them through exercise, and if you're eating that late at night, your body's going to say, well, what do you want me to do with that? These big carbohydrates need to be broken down. And so we break them down. The body does that and breaks them down into nice, neat little packages we call fat. And it stores them. And we know where they're stored on our waist, on the back of our arms, on our hips. So and the back. So we don't need that extra energy. Most of us are living in Florida. If you're out of state, that's great for you, but we don't need all that insulin. So insulin converts that sugar to fat, and it's a one-way street. It doesn't go back. So once insulin converts that sugar to fat that it's not going to use, you store it, and that it's a little hard to change that. So how we change that is by changing the way we eat. And when we talk about diabetes, especially type 2, which is most commonly happens as we age because we are not watching our eating. We're eating too many carbohydrates. And the pancreas then can't put that, that sugar into the cell anymore. So the receptor is just not receiving any insulin. And that's when we become type 2 diabetes. Type 1, people are usually born with that. And that means their pancreas is not making insulin at all. So you have to take in insulin. That's a little different story. But when we're dealing with patients, there's type 2. And I've worked with patients, we've reduced their type 2 diabetes by just changing diet. No magic, just a little dedication and a little correct choices. So glucose, it's hard because we crave it. It's worse craving than cocaine. And we have hunger cravings, we get moody with it. When our glucose drops, then our fat won't be released in the presence of insulin. So we get in this bind, so we can't get the fat out, even though we're trying to change that dynamic. So we kind of get stuck. So we have highs and lows. And you hear people say, my blood sugar is low. Well, if you eat something, you hear people say, well, I'll drink some orange juice or eat a piece of candy. Well, that's not going to take it. It's just going to throw it up and drop it back down again, which is not going to help. Being hyperglycemic means that you're very sensitive to it. Too much food or too little insulin, you get really this extreme thirst. Have to urinate often. Your body's trying to get rid of all that. So with eating a low carb, high fat diet, you have none of this. You're satiated. It's so much better. So sugar, which is glucose, is stored. We store 7 tablespoons of sugar in the liver, and we store 21 tablespoons in the muscle. So when we need to use our muscle, we don't need any more than that. In our brain, only needs 20 grams of carbohydrates a day. And if we don't eat it, guess who makes it? The liver. So if you eat no sugar, you'll become dependent on liver sugar, which will last 72 hours. Then the brain and the body will starve and die, unless your body taps into, yes, you got it, to tap your fat reserves. And I know some of us have a little more than others, so you have good reserves to pull from. So fat is a very misunderstood thing, and I always tell, and it's so funny because I had one of my patients come in today, and she knows we are finishing up our class, and she goes, "I remember when I took the class that it's not the fat that makes you fat; it's the sugar that makes you fat," which is exactly right. So if anything you've learned from these 4 weeks is that it's not the fat that makes you fat; it's the sugar that makes you fat. It's not a cushion. It's not an insulator. It's a form of energy. So we need it, but it's really a survival gland and it protects us against starvation of sugar. So when fat is your backup organ for sugar, so it's its big primary purpose. So if we're in famine and you're not eating enough fat, your body will hold on to all your body fat. So that's why when we eat enough fat, we become fat adapted. The body says, "Oh, okay, you're giving me enough fat that I need to survive. So all this extra fluffy stuff I can use for energy now." And it's a wonderful form of energy because it's a nice, long, slow burning form of energy. So it's really, really an effective form of energy for us. For me, I drink my organic whipping cream in my coffee, and that is my fat that I start my day with. And when I go ride or exercise, that's the fuel that I use. I don't eat when I'm on the bike. I use that fat and that I draw from that for my energy. So your goal should be to starve your body of sugar versus reducing calories and eating less and exercising more. When we talked about calories and calories out, it's really changing the type of foods that you're eating. So I'll help you with that. So mainstream recommends mainstream. This is why we're in trouble. They recommend that 65% of your total calories for the day are from carbohydrates. That's just shocking. So we don't really need that. So this is what we're going to do. Let me show you how this is done. So we're going to start watching carbohydrates when you look at your labels. I want you to keep your carbohydrates between 50 and 100. Start with that. If you're not used to doing this, keep it under 100. You don't need to go any lower than 50. So take this food. So your total carbs minus your fiber equal your net carbs. So you can see down here where it says total carbohydrates are 10 grams. And then you see it says dietary fiber is 5 grams. So you subtract, because that's dietary fiber that you eat, but you don't absorb it. That's utilized and helps to clean out your intestines. It helps to build your good bacteria. So it doesn't get metabolized as food per se. So we subtract that from total carbohydrates. So this food would then only have a total or a net carbohydrate count of 5 grams. So that's how we look at that. Don't worry about what the sugars say. You want to look at subtracting the fiber from the total carbs, and that gives you your net carbs. So let's have a couple examples here. So here's broccoli. So a head of broccoli is, you can see down there, 10 grams of carbohydrates. 3.8 of that grams is dietary fiber. So you subtract the 10 grams, the 3.8 from the 10 grams, so you get 6.2 grams of carbohydrates for a head of broccoli, the whole head, not just a stalk, the head. So then if you get an apple, and this is why you hear me say double the veggies to the fruit. If you have an apple, total grams of carbohydrates, 25. And then if you see the dietary fiber, it's 4.4. And this is a medium apple, 3 inches in diameter, 4.4 grams. Subtract that, that gives you 20.6 grams. But look at the sugars there, 19 grams. So, and remember, sugar from fruit is fructose, and the fructose has to be processed by the liver, only by the liver. So that's what gives us that belly fat. Look at celery. So it would be a good choice to eat. You can see that the total grams of carbohydrates for a stalk of celery are 1.2 grams. The fiber is 0.6. So you're at a 0.6 total grams of net carbohydrates. And the sugar is very minimal in that. So that'd be a good choice of foods to snack on. Great fiber, a good water vegetable, so it's very hydrophilic. And celery has a lot of really healthy benefits for us. So that brings us to protein. So protein really provides our body with the materials it needs to repair our muscles, ligaments, and tendons, build our bones, for hormones. And if we eat too much of it, it'll trigger insulin as well. So if we eat a carbohydrate, it takes our sugar blood sugar way up and then crashes. A protein brings it up and then it'll level off. A fat doesn't raise the sugar at all. That's why you can see that it's a good choice, especially for people that are type 2 diabetic. So we want to adjust to how a person is. So I always tell patients that half their body, ideal body weight in grams of carbohydrate, grams of protein. So I weigh 130. So half my body weight is 65. So my minimum that I would take in for a day is 65 grams of protein. So that's easy. Now that's your ideal weight, not your current weight, because we don't want to maintain that current weight if you have a weight management issue. So it's not an Atkins diet, because Atkins lets you eat all kind of crappy stuff. And that's not what we're doing here. So here's my saying, does eating make you fat? No, it's the sugar that makes you fat. So if your insulin is low, you'll be doing two things. You use dietary fat as fuel and you use stored fat as fuel. That's the key. So the amount of fat you eat is adjusted for your losing weight or maintaining weight. So if you want to lose weight, you drop your fat intake down a little bit. I usually say start with the ideal body weight. So my ideal body weight is 130. I try to keep around that, give or take, and usually between 127 and 130. I try to keep my grams of fat at 130 for the day. I keep satiated. I don't get hungry. I don't have an appetite, or I don't have any cravings because I'm eating enough good fat. My brain says, oh, you have what you need. So why do we need to burn fat? It's just the most efficient form of fuel for the body. And the body considers, the stored fat as last ditch. So if you are not eating dietary fats coming in, you'll tend to burn up your proteins. So you burn your muscle and you hold on to that fat. Your body thinks it's in famine. So super important to make sure you get enough dietary fat. So if you do a low carb, low fat, high protein, you spike the insulin up, you stress the kidneys and you stress the liver. That was kind of the Atkins diet. But if you do a low carb, low fat, low protein, you'll burn some fat, but you also burn body protein. So what we want to do is we want to keep our body out of stress by eating the fat. And those healthy fats will tell the brain, hey, you're not in any danger of starving, so you can let go of some of your reserves. And then the sugar, if we get in that fight or flight situation, that's when sugar can kick in and help us out a little extra. But that's the only time we really need that. But if you're a super stressed out person, you can see how it can affect your weight gain or weight loss by being stressful. You may eat foods you tend to use as comfort foods, or you may not eat at all. So either way, it'll make you maintain or put on weight. And I'm talking about fat weight. So remember, fat is really good for us. It provides a lot of different things. We get, vitamin A and D and vitamin E and vitamin K2. And you can see from grass-fed butter, from cod liver oil, grass-fed beef, your butter, your cheese, your nuts, your seeds, your oils. So your good oils, remember we talked about that last week. We talked about getting the trans fats out. That's the hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated seed oils, canola, vegetable oil, safflower oil, all those things, corn oil, and switch more to your extra virgin olive oil, your avocado oil, your expeller pressed and organic coconut oil and sunflower oil. So those are all good choices. Avocados, we have a lot of different things you can draw from. So medium chain fatty acids, those are monosaturated fats that bypass the liver and are used directly for energy. So they're kind of a low stress fat. That's your butter that's from a it's not grass-fed butter. The butter's from a grass-fed cow. Your coconut butter, your olive oil, grass-fed cheese. The cheese is not grass-fed, the cows are. Pasture-raised eggs and grass-fed beef, pasture-raised chickens, wild-caught salmon. All those are really easy for the body to manage. And when we talk about, beef, or we talk about chicken and it's commercially raised, we have a problem. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So ketones are cleaner fuel, 3 times the energy than sugar, very stable, for the blood sugar, helps to keep it very stable. It's only produced when the body is starving of carbohydrates. And then butyric acid, which is really good, it feeds the good gut bacteria, and so does the acetic acid. So those are 2 things that are produced from the body, going through that fat adaptive stage. So here's the beef. Where's the beef? Here it is. So you can see that there are no carbohydrates in the protein. It has 16 grams of fat, and it breaks down the saturated fats, polyunsaturated, and the monosaturated. And then the proteins are down at the bottom. It says 15 grams. So that would be a good choice for somebody that's on a low carb, high fat diet. So your fat vitamins, we just talked about them. You know, vegetables only provide 5% of fat-soluble vitamins. So the rest come from your animal fats, your butter, your cod liver oil, your fish, your eggs. And if you're on any of my protocols, you know that if you're over 50, you're on cod liver oil. Why? The best bang for your buck. It has naturally found vitamin A, has naturally found vitamin D, has the liver from the cod. How much liver are you eating? And then it also has the omega-3s. So it's a really good choice all the way around to boost up your omega-3s, but a really good fat for your heart, your brain, and your body. And just remember, these are also things that are what we call anti-tumoral, antifungal, and it's the main source of food for our gut flora. So we haven't talked a lot about digestion, but that is a huge part of what we need. Our large intestine is, 70% of our gut-assisted lymph tissue. It's our immune system. 90% of our serotonin is produced in our large intestine. Only 5% is produced in the brain. So think about it. People that are depressed. I mean, maybe if we fix their gut, their brain would work a little bit better. So this is like a weekday, a week look of a menu can be. So you have your shake in the morning. You can have your proteins in the morning, and I always recommend females to have proteins earlier. We're a little slower metabolically, so we take longer to break them down to be able to use them when we sleep at night to repair our bodies. You guys are lucky. You've got a higher metabolism, and it doesn't matter as much. But if you're hungry after eating this in a day, there's something wrong. And usually you can't even eat that much food because if you're eating enough good fat, then you're satiated. So snacking with nuts, good choice, macadamia nuts, almonds, cashews and pistachios are good. They're a little higher in carbohydrates, but your macadamia that's the queen of the nuts because when you eat a macadamia nut, it's like got about 21 grams of fat in it. Low in carbohydrates, but it enhances your brain function. It enhances your heart health. It helps to regulate blood sugar. It reduces inflammation, and it also gives you good gut support. So pick those nuts. It's the most expensive nut, my personal favorite. I know. So this just gives you enough food to eat. And like I said, if you're hungry, then there's a problem. You're not doing this right. So now let's throw in some intermittent fasting. So I'm giving you some opportunities. And if it feels overwhelming to you, that's when you want to call the office. Let's set up an appointment. Let's kind of create a personalized program for you. If you kind of just know some of these pieces and parts and it's helping to hone in, this is the purpose of that. So intermittent fasting is really, really good. I do it probably 4 times a week. So I do a 16-8 and 18-6, but it's an alternate way to calorie restriction. So I don't eat for 16 hours. So I have dinner at 6:30, with the exception of tonight. Have dinner at 6:30. I go to bed and I don't eat again the next day until 10:30. So that gives me 16-hour fasting. And then from that 10:30 to 6:30 is an 8-hour window of what we call feed time. Doesn't mean I ate for 8 hours. I usually do a 2-meal, dinner. And because I'm eating enough fat, I'm getting enough calories. So I don't have to really worry about counting calories. So you focus on when to eat and not what to eat, because if you're eating properly, you're satiated and you don't really get hungry. And you should just start getting hungry at that end of that fasting period. So there's a lot of benefits. You reduce your blood pressure, you have reduced blood lipids, so your cholesterol panel decreases. I know it sounds crazy. You're eating meat, but your cholesterol panel will be just perfect. It reduces inflammation, increases fat burning, increases your growth hormone release. It increases your metabolic rate, and it improves your appetite. Balances your blood sugar, and really does neurogenesis, which means repair for the brain. And God knows we all need that. So the variants of intermittent fasting, so a couple different things, like you can alternate day. So you do a 36-hour fast and a 12-hour feed. You can randomly skip meals. You can eat or do a 24-hour fast and then 1 or 2 times per week. And then like the 16-8, that's what I like to do. I do an 18-6 the next day. And then you can do a warrior diet where it's a 20-hour fast and a 4-hour feed. So you try to consume your calories in that 4 hours. That's a little challenging. And we have some athletes that do that, but you've got to be able to burn those calories off. So if your car is sitting in the carport and you're not driving it and you keep putting gasoline in it, that gasoline is eventually going to spill all over the place because you're not utilizing it. So keep that in mind. So, you can start with just limited to 1 8-hour window. So from noon to 8 o'clock. so that you only eat from that time. So just keep it. I mean, not many of us get up in the middle of the night to eat. If you do, there might be a problem. You're not eating enough good calories during the day. So you can limit meals to 1 4-hour window, like a 6 to 10. So there's a variety of ways to do that. If you need help with that, that's when you reach out to me. So I have to talk about food allergies because this always comes up, because we've taken some foods out that you probably don't realize you're either allergic to, and it's not really an allergy, it's probably more of an intolerance. Most people are more intolerant to certain foods than allergic. So I described the difference on that is you can have, if you eat a food and immediately you're allergic to it, you will get it out of your system. You'll throw it up or your heart rate will go up. If you're intolerant to it, it'll happen over a period of time. So it may take 4 to 6 hours before that happens. So, I mean, these are all things that can happen with foods that we eat and, food allergies. So an allergy, the body's immune system mistakes the food as something harmful, and it happens usually fast, within minutes. Sneezing, hives, nausea, migraines, red eyes. Intolerance to the digestive system's response to food or additive. It can't process it or it causes irritation, usually a longer time frame, and it can be up to a couple days later. So these are the most common food allergens: peanuts, tree nuts, fish, shellfish, eggs, milk, and wheat, and soy. So if you're going to start adding these things back in, you want to be gentle doing that. So if you're adding eggs in, make sure they're, if you didn't eat eggs on the 21 day, you're adding eggs in, make sure they're, pasture raised. I know they're expensive right now, but your health is worth it. If you're eating all the right foods, you don't really need that much food. So I would really watch grains and things like that. Your little book, you can keep a kind of a journal. So add one food in at a time. The food that you crave is a food to suspect. Unfortunately, the body craves a food that's not good for it. So that's just the way it is. So you could try grains in, but I generally on a low carb, high fat diet, we don't do grains. Once in a while I may do some steel cut oats, but generally we stay away from quinoa. Quinoa is a pseudo grain, but still we don't really use it a lot when we're doing low carb, high fat. We switch to using something like cauliflower that's rice, and that works perfectly fine. Your dairy, your cheese, milk, and yogurt. I'm careful with the cheese. It's just an easy go-to, and my body, I like it. My body fat doesn't like it. Well, my body fat does like it. It doesn't agree with me. The softer the cheese, the more lactose, the more likely of an allergy or an intolerance. So nuts and seeds, just know what your limitations are. If anybody's allergic to something, they by now know that. Shellfish, shrimp, and mussels. So they're bottom feeders. That why it has a tendency to cause a problem. So just be aware of it. And then after your grains, try your eggs and things like that. And so Girl Scout cookies are coming around the corner here. So just be aware there are a lot of allergens in them. So be mindful of that. And they're not on a low carb, high fat diet. Just so you know. So fewer than 1 in 25 people have an actual food allergy. So most people just have intolerances, and so don't and the worst thing that they have is hives. And the worst thing it could be, you could have the hives or anaphylaxis where your throat closes up. So where do we go from here? So meal plan is really important. Eating foods that are nutrition rich and fiber dense. You have all the tools in that little booklet. They've got recipes in there. And remember, we are continuing the GI adsorb for another 7 days. So I would encourage you to eat similar to what you've been doing. You can add a few things in. If you want to add your caffeine back in, that's fine. Don't add sugar to it. But continue the GI adsorb. That's 4 GI adsorb at night before you go to bed with a glass of water. That will continue that toxin pull. And I think this has been a really effective, and that pulls toxins, and we build toxins in our fat. That's where we store them. That's why it's really important to continue that. So you'll have enough to last you another 7 days in case you missed a dose or two. Just finish till the end and then go off of it. But that'll help continue another day. And then if you're coming to see me and you need to do blood work, I want you to do it the day after you finish the GI adsorb, so we get a really accurate, clean liver panel, and your blood sugar will be good and all that will be good. So if you're getting ready to do a functional medicine appointment with me, or we're going to retest blood, that's when I want you to do it. call the office, get Marianne, we'll set you up with a requisition, and then you can make an appointment and get that done first thing in the morning as a fasting blood sugar. So your list on the back of your book, you can still use that as a shopping list. Still twice as many veggies as fruit, fresh fruit, shop local. The food's better. These processed foods have glyphosate, and glyphosate, it's a contaminant, it's a toxin. And you can see just in the amount of glyphosate which is Roundup, that is found in foods that are refined products that have refined sugar and refined flour. So, if you're eating any of these foods, you're putting yourself at risk. Just looking at the potato chips, 812.53 parts per billion of glyphosate in your system. And we know that Roundup uses that to kill weeds. And just in your meal from your local, burger place, you get a lot of Roundup built in there, your high fructose corn syrup, your GMO, genetically modified fillers, and the cows that are fed genetically modified corn, and all the herbicides and all that are put on it. And then they usually use the canola oil to cook it in. So it's not really a good bang for your buck at all. Maybe a good bang on your heart, but not for your body. So we know that the glyphosate, now we're finding it in people that are not even around it, because it's in all the foods we're eating, and they use it to kill the wheat before they harvest it. And I found this out last night. One reason they do it is so that it doesn't mold when they store it. The second reason they do it is to make it easier on their farming equipment, so their farming equipment stays better longer. It's not about us. It's all about them. So we really have a lot of damage that the glyphosate, goes into our body. So, it robs us of nutrition, it robs us of minerals, and all our essential amino acids, and it causes toxicity. So don't use it. And I love these little experiments kids do. I mean, this is a squirrel. Even squirrels know the difference between organic and GMO. And so we have a lot of digestive issues happening with that. We have a lot of obesity, autism, neuroinflammation caused from that, liver diseases and cancer just from that. So that's why it's not the best thing. So if you have it in your house, get rid of it. There's a lot of weed killers you can find online that are natural. And just remember, what they feed the cows, you are what they ate. So if they're eating junk and you're eating them, that's why we want to get cows that are, meat that is from cows that are grass fed and grass finished and not fed a lot of grain. Mars sells their old Skittles and candy and chocolate and stuff like that to farmers so that they can use that when the corn prices are really high. So they're eating leftover candy, sometimes wrappers and all, to fatten up the cattle before they send them off. So be careful what you eat. And so try to choose local and organic. My challenge would always be to do at least 10% local. For us, we use Noble Roots Farm. It's a CSA, which is a community share program. I mean, these are some of the fruits and vegetables we get from there. They're just amazing. We get our beef there, and our chicken and our eggs and all that kind of stuff there. And I think for $8.50 for 12 weeks, we get more than enough. I mean, we pick our stuff on Sunday, and the good thing is it lasts longer because they're just picking it that day. I mean, when we get our carrots, there's still dirt on the roots, and the lettuces last, for almost a week to 2 weeks because it's not being carted all over the United States. Couple things you can look at. This is environmentalworkinggroup.org. You can go there. They have a lot of foods, personal care products. You can download the app, and you can scan foods at the store and scan products at the store to tell you which ones are good. It's a great app to use. So if you're not really sure if your products you're using are healthy, they'll give you a score. They'll let you know. So they do a bunch of different ratings. I like the ratings they do for your food as well. So they always come up with a couple different lists. They come up with what we call the dirty dozen. So these are the foods that you really want to work to get organic, because these are the foods that are most likely to be full of pesticides, insecticides, and genetically modified. So this is their dirty dozen. And you just go on, you can Google dirty dozen for 2023. And then this is the clean 15. So you're a little safer to get some of these foods that will be a little bit cleaner, just depending on your area. And so this will give you some choices. So your daily diet, I want you to continue eating whole foods. I want you to limit those high calorie, those refined foods and those trans fats. I want you to eat nutrition rich and fiber dense foods. So not much different than what you're doing. I'm just going to allow you to have more fat, less carbs, and moderate protein. So keeping your carbohydrates under 100, between 50 and 100, keeping your protein at half your body weight in grams of protein. So if I want to weigh 130, half of that is 65. So 65 grams is what I would eat for protein. So if you weigh 200, but you only want to weigh 150, half of 150 is 75. You would do 75 grams of protein. And then I just kind of do it. If your ideal body weight, do that many grams of fat. For me, that helps me maintain my weight. If I would do more fat, I would put weight on. If I would do less fat, I would lose weight. So if you do the ideal body weight, so if you weigh 200 and you weigh 150, you do 150 grams of fat a day. And trust me, you will be so satiated and not get hungry. So concentrate on veggies, twice as many veggies as fruit, your oils, your animal and plant, your plant-based proteins. You throw a little quinoa in there and still do your waters and good stuff. So, here's your challenge. Try to eat within a 10-mile radius from your home. Find a co-op to join. Try to find a raw restaurant. We've got Living Green here in Lake County. There's a couple restaurants in Winter Park. So just Google a raw restaurant near you. Support the local. They work really hard to give us really good food. Try to grow a vegetable. Tomatoes are easy. We have a living tower that we put up in March to grow all our lettuces on and our herbs. Plant a butterfly garden. Just Google monarch butterfly seeds, heirloom seeds, and you can get them. They'll send them to you for a very low cost. Plant them, and you can grow your own monarch butterflies. Your milkweed is the host plant for the monarchs. So compost, we have a compost here, and please recycle. So those are all things we can do to eat well and live well. So we'll always have little roadblocks. Don't try to lose it too fast. It took you a while to put it on. We're always here for help. Try some new foods. If you go to a social gathering, prepare something that you can eat so you have something to eat. Don't go hungry. And if you're out and you want to know what like the sizes, here's a little guide here. A cup is the size of a baseball. So, that kind of gives you that. And you can look online and find a schematic what does a cup look like, or compare it that way. And then you can come up with that little, picture there. We still want to limit your alcohol and your caffeine. And this, I always tell my patients that, we're going to fall off the wagon, so I don't want you to fall off the wagon, drag it into the woods, set it on fire, and use the insurance money to buy cupcakes. So just know that when you do fall off the wagon, life happens. We're here. And quarterly. So I've been doing a 10-day every quarter. So April, July, and October. But I was talking with one of my colleagues, and he used to do a 10-day. Now he does a 3-day reset. So I think I'm going to discuss with him how he does that. I think I'll incorporate that. That way it gets you kind of back in real quick, and you can touch base real quick instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, I got to do 10 days. So I'll let you know that information. It'll be on the website as well. So incorporate your exercise. Last week you heard how important exercise is just for us as we age, for longevity, for the health of the brain. So incorporate that as part of your daily routine. It's got to be some cardio, and it's got to be some strength training. We've got to build the muscle and exercise the heart. You have to do a little bit of both, and keep that in your, you can alternate days, but you got to do a little bit of both. And, make your own juices. All these juices are made by companies that they're not interested in your health. They're interested in the almighty dollar. And what you think naked juice sounds so healthy, but if you read the label, it's not. Same thing from Adwala. I mean, if you look at the Bullhouse Farms, you should see the amount of sugar that's in them. And they taste good, and people think, oh, I'm being healthy because I'm doing these juices that are, already pre-made. Well, you're not. You can make your own. Get your own NutriBullet, save your money, and make your own. There's plenty of recipes out there. And NutriBullet, if you have a NutriBullet, you get a whole recipe booklet of how to make different kind of smoothies. So give it a try. So we're here for you. I'm always here for you. Reach out if you need to get an appointment, and maybe think about reaching out and getting into some type of functional medicine program, something that's personalized for you, whether you have health issues or not. Even if you feel like you're a deer in headlights, you don't know what to do, so you don't do anything. I'm here for you. So reach out to me. Just remember, our goal is to create a lifetime of health and vitality for you. So thank you for being here. And if you have questions, just call the office or reach out to us on the website. Good luck. See you in for the 3-day reset in April.